Titanic. The very name echoes through history. A ship that was supposed to be unsinkable, the pinnacle of human engineering and luxury. A floating palace bigger than any the world had ever seen. But just 4 days into its maiden voyage, Titanic would vanish beneath the black Atlantic, taking more than 1,500 lives with it and leaving behind one of the most haunting stories ever told. What really happened that night? Was it fate, arrogance, or a series of avoidable mistakes that doomed the greatest ship of its era? The truth is more complicated and more chilling than you might think. Let's start at the beginning. The RMS Titanic was a marvel of its age. Nearly 900 feet long, with 9 decks and weighing over 46,000 tons, it was the largest moving object in the world at the time. Built in Belfast by Harland and Wolff, Titanic's construction took over 2 years and involved more than 15,000 workers. The ship was packed with features unheard of for the era. A heated swimming pool, a gymnasium pool, a gymnasium, Turkish baths, electric elevators, libraries, and restaurants that rivaled the best in London and Paris. Titanic had 16 watertight compartments, a design that led many to believe the ship was practically unsinkable. Newspapers everywhere ran with that word, unsinkable. It became a marketing catchphrase, a badge of pride for the White Star Line and its passengers. But there was a catch. Titanic only carried 20 lifeboats, enough for just about half the people on board, and well below what was needed for a full ship. Regulations at the time hadn't caught up to the size of these new superliners. April 10th, 1912. Titanic left Southampton, England, under clear skies, with more than 2,200 passengers and crew. The ship stopped briefly in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland, picking up more passengers. On board were the wealthiest people in the world, like John Jacob Astor Voigt and Benjamin Guggenheim, alongside poor families in third class seeking a new life in America. Captain Edward J. Smith, a veteran of the sea, was at the helm for his final voyage before retirement. Excitement buzzed throughout the ship. Passengers dined in luxury, strolled the promenade decks, and marveled at the ship's size. But beneath the glamour, not everything was perfect. Some of the lookouts were without binoculars. Third-class passengers were separated by locked gates. And most critically, the ship was steaming full speed ahead through waters known for icebergs in the spring. By April 14th, Titanic had crossed into the iceberg-strewn waters of the North Atlantic. Throughout the day, the wireless operators received multiple iceberg warnings from nearby ships. At least 6 messages warned of ice ahead, but not all reached the captain of the bridge. The operators were swamped with relaying passenger messages and didn't treat the warnings as urgent. The sea that night was eerily calm. A rare flat calm with no wind and no waves to break against hidden icebergs. It was a moonless night, making it nearly impossible to spot ice until it was dangerously close. And still, Titanic continued at over 22 knots, nearly top speed. The rationale? The White Star Line wanted headlines, and there was a sense of invincibility surrounding the ship. At 11:40 p.m., everything changed. Lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee spotted a looming shadow. Iceberg, right ahead, they shouted, ringing the bell and calling the bridge. First Officer William Murdoch ordered the engines reversed and the wheel hard to port, but at Titanic's size and speed, the response was sluggish. The iceberg scraped along the starboard side for about 10 seconds, opening a series of gashes below the waterline. Rivets popped, and 5 of Titanic's watertight compartments began to flood. The ship was designed to float with 4 compartments flooded, but not 5. Titanic's fate was sealed in less than a minute. At first, many passengers barely noticed the impact. The vibration felt like a minor bump. Some joked about the ship stopping for ice. In the first-class lounge, drinks were still being poured and music played on. But below deck, the crew quickly realized the situation was dire. Water was rising rapidly. Captain Smith and Thomas Andrews, Titanic's chief designer, inspected the damage and did the math. The ship would sink within 2 hours. The order was given, lifeboats to be uncovered and passengers to get to the boat deck. But the ship's design, combined with poor communication, meant that lifeboats were launched slowly, often not full. Some passengers refused to leave the unsinkable Titanic, convinced it was safer to stay aboard. Third-class passengers were at a particular disadvantage. Locked gates and confusing passageways made escape difficult, and language barriers slowed communication. The class system was deadly that night. As the ship listed more and the tilt became obvious, panic began to set in. Flares were launched, lighting up the cold night sky in desperate calls for help. The Titanic's 8 musicians set up on the deck, playing music to calm the crowds, a decision that became legendary. Lifeboats were lowered into the water, some with as few as a dozen people, others dangerously overloaded. Women and children were given priority, but confusion reigned. Some officers interpreted the order as women and children only, sending boats half empty when men could have filled seats. Crew members struggled to operate the unfamiliar davits. Every minute, the ship sank lower. Below decks, engineers and stokers kept working, fighting to keep the lights on and the pumps running, buying precious time for evacuation. Their bravery saved countless lives, but cost them their own. By 2 a.m., Titanic's bow was submerged, the stern rising high above the water. The last lifeboats left as desperate passengers clung to the rails. Captain Smith was last seen on the bridge, his fate uncertain. In the wireless room, operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride sent SOS calls until the power finally failed. At 2:18 a.m., with a groan of twisting metal, Titanic broke in half. The stern settled briefly before rising and plunging vertically into the ocean. Hundreds of people were left in the water, clinging to debris, calling out in the darkness. The water was just above freezing. Most would survive only minutes. Nearly all of those left in the water died from hypothermia. The few lifeboats that did return found only a handful of survivors. The RMS Carpathia, alerted by Titanic's wireless operators, raced through ice fields at top speed and arrived just after 4 a.m. Survivors, numb with cold and shock, were pulled from lifeboats onto the rescue ship. Out of more than 2,200 souls, only about 700 survived. News spread quickly. By the time Carpathia docked in New York, the world was transfixed. Newspapers ran front-page headlines. People demanded answers. How could the unsinkable Titanic vanish on its maiden voyage? Stories of heroism and loss emerged, as did accounts of negligence and confusion. The sinking of Titanic sent shockwaves around the world. Public inquiries on both sides of the Atlantic examined every detail. The verdict was clear: overconfidence, inadequate safety regulations, and human error doomed the ship. New laws required enough lifeboats for everyone, round-the-clock radio monitoring, and the creation of the International Ice Patrol. Titanic's wreck would not be discovered until 1985, more than 70 years later. Artifacts raised from the deep became museum pieces. The story inspired countless books, films, and memorials. But more than anything, Titanic remains a warning, a reminder of the cost of ignoring danger and believing in the impossible. The sinking of Titanic isn't just a tale of disaster. It's a story of hubris, hope, courage, and heartbreak. Its lessons are as important now as they were in 1912. What do you think was the biggest cause of the Titanic disaster? Human error, arrogance, or just terrible luck? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you learned something new, hit like and subscribe for more gripping history. For more legendary disasters, check out our video on the Hindenburg disaster. Why did it really explode? Thanks for watching. And remember, history has a way of repeating itself if we stop paying attention.